IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling with Notre Dame football midweek mailbag day. How you doing? It's Jesse Stiers on one end, Sean Stiers here on the other end. We've had a rainy day here in South Bend. How are you guys in Cleveland holding up?
Just some spotty rain showers here and there throughout the day. Not a whole lot, kind of like 15, 20-minute patches. So yeah, nothing too crazy. I have some volleyball to play after this, so hopefully the weather can stay nice going into the evening time.
Yeah, well, Salty with I guess a bit of a hat tip towards you. He was about to say nice on the timing, but yes, it is Jesse and not Vince. And notice the time; it just hit 6:01. So we are off and rolling, and it is mailbag night. So get your questions in. Just a few questions in the old bag right now. We've got quite a bit to get to in rapid fire a little bit later. Jess, Vince and I ranked our top 10 players on the roster, on the Notre Dame roster yesterday. I have Sam Hartman at number 1. Vince has Joe Alt at number 1. Who would be number 1 for you on the Notre Dame roster?
This is an age-old classic debate. Do you go with the guy who is obviously going to play the sexier position and lead you to more wins, or are you going to go with the guy who's the most talented at his position and probably going to be a top 10 draft pick? So for me, I have to look at what is going to contribute the most to Notre Dame as a team and their success. And that's Sam Hartman, because he's going to do more. Like if we were looking at, like if there was a WAR stat, wins above replacement for football, I think that Sam Hartman would provide more WAR than Joe Alt would. So I would have to say Sam Hartman, just because he's going to give you more wins in the win column than what Joe Alt could. Notre Dame, not that I'm saying they would be better off with Joe Alt, but if Joe Alt went down,
Joe Alt, you mean?
Yeah, if Joe Alt went down, there's still 4 other linemen and, you know, some very – they have talented depth along the offensive line. It wouldn't be quite as a drastic of a blow to lose Joe Alt compared to Sam Hartman.
Yeah, Sam Hartman stands to make them much better than, you know, just what you said. That I didn't think about the analytical view of it, but you're right. Like if you looked at it as a wins above replacement type deal, I think that Notre Dame, you know, like that's a question, you know, that we've already had here from different points on this show. If something happens to Sam Hartman, you know, what happened, you know, how good can they be when the next quarterback comes in, whether it's Angeli or Minchie? You know, we haven't talked about Alt, but they've got a lot of good offensive linemen in that group. And I think the drop-off would be farther at the quarterback position than it would be at the tackle position, even with a tackle who, you know, we're talking about as a first-round draft pick next year. So, all right, good tiebreaker. So tie goes to Sam Hartman. Let's get to some questions. Salty wants to know, how would you rank Ohio State, USC, and Clemson in order of difficulty for Notre Dame this season?
So this is a tough question, because difficulty versus concern, I think, are two different things in terms of this. I would say, so if we're looking at difficulty, and that's just looking at roster alone, matchup, etc., I think Clemson is the easiest. So I would put Clemson as
Clemson easiest.
That would be number 3, least difficult. Number 2 would be USC. I see this is hard because USC obviously has a Heisman quarterback, but I think Ohio State as a whole is better. Like their whole roster, their coaching dynamic, etc. I think that I'm more afraid of that when compared to USC. So I think I'd go USC 2, and the most concern I would put is Ohio State, or sorry, the most difficulty. But then that order kind of flips for me in terms of concern. I'm most concerned about the Clemson game, and I'm least concerned about the USC game, and then the Ohio State game is kind of in the middle there for me. So I think that Ohio State is the most difficult and Clemson is the least difficult, but I think that they pose different concerns based off of, last year's matchups, home and away this year. And I know that I have said it to you before, and I don't think you necessarily agree. I have a bad feeling about, the taste that was left on Dabo Swinney's mouth after leaving South Bend last year and then Notre Dame coming into Death Valley this year. So that's why that game is of concern to me. And I'll actually be at that game. I just bought my tickets a couple of days ago. I'm going to be at the Notre Dame and Clemson game.
Nice. Yeah, you've got to put Ohio State at number one, even though they lose CJ Stroud. By then we'll know a lot more about, and some of this is going to depend on the quarterback. Like as a whole team, with the exception of the quarterback, Ohio State is a very known commodity, obviously just coming off a playoff berth, whereas USC, as you mentioned, they've got a Heisman Trophy winner. They've had more roster turnover again in year two under Lincoln Riley, but the fact that they've got Caleb Williams, who stands to be the number one pick in the draft, and just a lot of uncertainty, a lot more transfers coming in once again. One thing that stood out, I was just working on a little project that'll be up on Irish Breakdown here pretty soon. Duke and USC were 1-2 in turnover margin in the nation last year. And I think actually it was USC number one, Duke number two. But both of them in their first year under a new head coach vaulted to the top of the nation in terms of turnover margin last year. I think it was 29 turnovers forced by USC and like 26 for Duke. How sustainable is that? I really, from year to year, turnovers, like you can coach forcing turnovers, obviously, but turnovers also tend to be fairly arbitrary, like even just recovering a fumble, like you can dislodge a ball from a ball carrier, but actually recovering it, because you're talking, about an odd-shaped sphere out there in the football. We all know that it takes funny hops. So, they both had to rely on that quite a bit in year one, and Notre Dame is obviously going to face both of those teams this year. How replicable is that? How are they able to duplicate that? So I would still put USC number one. I would put Clemson number two. I would flip-flop it with you because of some of the stuff that you mentioned, because of the fact that it's a road game, and this is the first time that Notre Dame has been there in 8 years. And then I would put USC at number three, even with the quarterback. There's still some uncertainties with them.
Yeah, and I trust Ryan Day and Dabo Swinney as a coach more than I trust Lincoln Riley, right? Like Lincoln Riley, to me, made his money on running up the score in the Big 12 and capitalizing on having really explosive offenses, lack of defenses. But I think Ryan Day and Dabo Swinney have been in the trenches more of like big games, right? Like Lincoln Riley hasn't won the big games, the postseason games, the playoff games, etc. He can win in the regular season, but I mean, those are against, again, he can run his offense and run up the score against bad Pac-12 defenses, bad Big 12 defenses. But when he gets to play in some of these, more defensive-minded, strong-willed teams, I think he runs into a little bit more issues. So I also trust Dabo Swinney and Ryan Day as a coach more so than I do Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, exactly. I hesitate. I hesitate to bring this up. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it because, well, first, before we do that, Quinn says he's going to be at the Clemson game too. So he wants to meet up and talk shop about your hat. So very
we can do that.
In your hat. Yes. This is what I hesitate to bring up, but Crying Belly is here. And he says, we're so screwed this year if Hartman is named QB1. There's really no if about it. We know at this point. I mean, like, there would have at least been some if Tyler Buckner were still here. But, Hartman says Or Cryan says Hartman contributed to Duke's success on that front. I feel like you're just a hot take artist, masquerading as a guy in the chat crying. Like, are you just trying to push everyone's buttons on this? Hartman only threw one interception against Duke last year. So, okay, yeah, he contributed to it. How many interceptions did Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine contribute to Marshall's turnover numbers last year? And I'm not trying to take shots at them, but let's be honest, 3 interceptions contributed greatly to the outcome of that game. Let me just ask you this, Jesse, to kind of put, maybe some sort of real question to this on Hartman. Do you have any real concern about the fact that Sam Hartman has thrown 27 interceptions in the last 2 seasons?
I'm nowhere near concerned because he had the entire backpack of the offense on his back, right? They only had success when he threw the ball downfield, and they asked him to throw the ball a ton downfield. And so naturally, when let's say a team asks a quarterback to throw the ball 50 times in a game per game, and they ask a quarterback to throw the ball 75 times per game. The guy who's throwing 75 naturally is throwing the ball 25 more times per game. That's going to lead to a higher probability of interceptions being thrown. That's just naturally, what's going to happen, right? Like if you're asked to throw the ball a lot and the basis of an offense is completely relied on throwing the ball, there's going to be interceptions. Sam Hartman knew he had to make plays and probably forced windows that were a little tight, but he knew if he didn't make those plays, they probably weren't going to win. They weren't going to stay in games, etc. And the other reason I think I'm not too concerned is the ACC is the common denominator in this equation. Sam Hartman is still going to play a majority ACC schedule while at Notre Dame. And when we saw what he did against majority ACC teams against Wake Forest. He had success. I think that there would be a little bit more concern if maybe he was going ACC to, maybe a Big Ten schedule, because I would say the Big Ten defenses generally are better than, ACC defenses. But again, the common denominator in both of these cases is Sam Hartman was asked to throw the ball a lot, and he was asked to throw the ball against ACC defenses. He's going to be asked to throw the ball less at Notre Dame because there's going to be more of a run game presence.
Right.
And the defenses are majority going to be the same. So I am not overly concerned. I think actually Sam Hartman's interception ratio is going to go down this year because he's going to have better looks, cleaner pockets. And again, the run game is going to open up the secondary a little bit more. I think Sam Hartman's going to be playing chess this year compared to maybe playing, checkers 2 years ago. I just think he's going to, that being at Notre Dame and having a legit run game and a clean pocket to stand in is just going to make his game so much more easier. He's going to be a surgeon out there, almost just kind of picking apart where he wants to go with the ball. He knows defense. He knows how to manipulate defenses. So you can't replace that experience. He's up there all time in passing yards, touchdowns, etc. for a reason.
They were not a running football team. Wake Forest was not a running football team. It's going to be a different system. And again, we talked about it not that long ago. Was it earlier this week? They had these rapid fire questions and everything else start to blend. I think it was you and I talking about it, about the yards gained before the catch that Notre Dame had last year compared to what Wake Forest had last year, and the fact that Sam Hartman is going to make this a much more vertical offense, and that just by being in place is going to help the run game out as well. And I just, you're still talking about a guy. He threw 6 touchdown passes against Clemson last year. You've got a direct comparison with Drew Pine. How many touchdowns did Drew Pine throw against Clemson last year? He didn't even throw for 100 yards.
It's even crazier because Clemson had to game plan Wake Forest to we can't let Sam Hartman beat us. And Sam Hartman beat them. And at Notre Dame, it was, we can't let the run game beat us. And still, Pine couldn't throw the ball effectively, knowing that Clemson wanted to first and foremost shut down the short underneath routes in the run game. So, and a game plan where, they were preparing for pass against Wake Forest, Sam Hartman still put up way better ungodly numbers in a game plan that was really trying to limit Notre Dame's run game. And the pass game should have been there more for Drew Pine.
Yeah, and DJ saying that the offensive line last year was horrible. That's something as well. He threw, I think I might have said 17. It is 16 interceptions Sam Hartman threw in his last 2 seasons at Wake Forest, 12 last year, 14 the year before that. But oh, by the way, 77 combined touchdowns. That's a pretty good touchdown to interception ratio. But he was also sacked 69 times in those 2 seasons combined. 34 times he was sacked last year, 35 2 years ago. So that plays a big factor as well. He's going to have a much better offensive line at Notre Dame, plus the running game that is going to, again, help complement what he is doing in the passing game. So it's just not apples to apples when you're talking about the switch. And we got just a glimpse of it in that spring game with some of the stuff that he was doing out there in the passing game. So I don't have any large concerns. I almost had a Hartman question in rapid fire today, but I will bring it to you tomorrow, kind of a little bit along the lines of what we're talking about here, but also a little bit different. Go ahead and shoot your questions in if you haven't had a chance so far. The phone lines are open. You can get them in right now. Salty says Ramlock Carrad self-imposed a ban on himself after Notre Dame lost Justin Scott. He is back now. Is this the good thing, or should his self-imposed ban have lasted longer? What do you think, Jesse?
I think we can let him back in. Any self-imposed ban is long enough for me. I would never give myself a self-imposed ban. I would never suspend myself. So for someone to get ahead of the curve and say, hey, I'm the reason why here. I'm the common denominator. I'm okay to sit a couple out and come back. So to me, I'm glad he's back. And I think it was a mature move of him to give himself that self-imposed ban.
That's right. I think he kind of peeked in maybe late in the show yesterday, but I think you're right. It was, I think he put himself in timeout long enough. He needed to be back, among his friends. And so here he is, Ramlock Carrad. And he wants to know what Tommy Rees's first-year record as Northwestern head football coach will be.
Ooh, that's a good question. And I think there's 2 things to get into this question, obviously, is one, Tommy Rees going to be a college head football coach? I will say no, but I will entertain the idea of him going to Northwestern because of the fit, right? Like, he knows what it's like to coach at a academically strenuous university and what kind of, personnel and players you can kind of work with in that scenario. I don't see him having an above 500 record in his first season. Northwestern isn't the sexy Big Ten school to go to in terms of recruiting and kind of keeping up with, right now, Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, Michigan State, etc. Like, I just don't think that you're going to be able to keep up in the first couple of years. And I think with, Rutgers having Wisconsin having new head coaches, Nebraska having new head coaches, I think they're ultimately going to get ahead of Northwestern on that front. So I would say that his first season would be a solid 6-6 or 5-7. But again, that's assuming he's going there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's happening. I think his aspirations are a segue to the NFL.
I think he went to Alabama to ultimately have a chance to become an NFL head coach. That's what I think that move is about. He wants to be, like every not everything that he said, but some of the stuff, like I think it was 2 training camps ago or whenever it was, when we got to talk to him, he sat there and he talked about watching every NFL game and breaking down every NFL game from the previous season, so like NFL, he's worked for a little bit in the NFL with the Chargers. And I asked him straight up, again, this has been a little bit more than a year ago, and he gave me one of those non-answer answers, well, I am where my feet are planted and that kind of stuff. I think he wants to be in the NFL. I don't think he wants to be a college head football coach. I would not be surprised if he, at least is offered the opportunity to interview for Northwestern. He would make sense since he's both obviously has a background of coaching and playing at a private school like Notre Dame, and he's also worked at Northwestern before, prior to coming to Notre Dame and prior to his Chargers experience. But I don't think he wants to be a head football coach, I would say first season, if it does happen, he would be 5-7. Just where, that would be what I would put on it. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. But, all right. A few more questions that are rolling in.
You got some up there. I've seen at least 3 or 4 MBs in the chat.
All right.
There's one from.
I'll throw this one up from DT. Most fan bases are optimistic this time of year. What is wrong with Notre Dame fans?
I think as Notre Dame fans, we've just kind of all seen it before, right? And this is Notre Dame gets the hype every season, right? And so the hype kind of wears off. You're kind of tired of it, right? Like you want to. It's one thing to be hyped, but it's another thing to not win a championship since 1988 and have the expectations of pretty much a championship or bust every year. And so if Notre Dame fans don't feel like, they're up to par with those kind of the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Ohio States in the world, it's very easy to compare and contrast. And you start kind of nitpicking of, hey, we're not quite good for X, Y, and Z, or we got Sam Hartman, but Sam Hartman's not good for X, Y, and Z, and et cetera, and et cetera. I just think that as Notre Dame fans, there's just too high of expectations every year. So you kind of get blinded by things that you should generally be optimistic about. I don't know, per se, having Sam Hartman be the transfer quarterback and coming in and having the opportunity to play on a talented roster. Like, I am optimistic and very excited about that this season.
Well, I feel like there's definitely, there's at the very least, some combativeness from Notre Dame fans, like there might be some pessimism, like with Crying Belly being on the extreme, but at the same time, there are plenty of fans who are fairly optimistic. It's when some of the national people start pushing back and telling Notre Dame, well, you're only going to win 8 or 9 games, or CJ Carr is now the 14th best quarterback, which I agree that that's a stupid take anyway, CJ, when we talked about that yesterday. But whatever it happens to be, it's when some of the national people start saying stuff, well, Notre Dame, this is their ceiling. That's when Notre Dame people really, I don't know if it's necessarily full-blown optimism, but it's definitely when they start pushing back. I feel like there's a decent amount of optimism, but I also feel like there's still some of that Brian Kelly, post Brian Kelly PTSD hanging around. To an extent, they do still have to go and show that they can prove it. And there are enough questions with the staff, like, the whole, the Andy Ludwig to Jared Parker, and obviously Tommy Rees, going to Alabama.
Yeah, I think
started it. There's enough doubt, I think, and enough, change that there are some legitimate questions that still have to be answered, especially after an 8-4 season last year.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is first-year coach coming off. Marcus Freeman's coming off his first season ever as a college football head coach. The quarterback and then the quarterback carousel of, Buckner getting hurt, Pine being the replacement, Pine being, Pine transferring, Buckner transferring, Hartman coming in, a lot of new coaches. Obviously the biggest is Jared Parker and the offense. Nobody knows what that offense is going to look like, right? We at least had the comfortability of knowing what a Tommy Rees offense is going to look like. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And then coming off a disappointing 8-4 season and not knowing definite answers, I think definitely fuels the fire to some degree.
Yes. The bitter aftertaste of last year's expectations and how quickly it all unraveled understandably leaves some weary. Well said, Stymie Snerdley. Speaking of someone we haven't heard as much from recently. Very well said, Stymie. I've got to agree with that. James, in your best informed opinion, who do you foresee playing behind Estime as far as rotation goes, i.e. 1-2 punch like Estime Diggs? I fully expect, and again, we did our player rankings 1 through 10 on the roster yesterday. I've got Jadarian Price at number 10 on my roster. As I said yesterday, Diggs and Estime combined for over 1,700 yards last year. Very respectable for both of them, with with Estime at what 920 and Diggs I think at 821. And Jadarian Price was going to be ahead of both of them if he was healthy last year. So I fully expect Jadarian Price to be the guy. But we'll find out relatively soon what things look like once training camp gets going, I think.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is Estime is going to be the guy. He's going to be about the 50% workload guy. And then at least to start the season, I think Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne are going to be about 25% and 25% to start the season. And I think really it's up for the taking between those two who wants to go out and get more ball carrying opportunities. But again, in my opinion, I think Estime is going to be the lead, guy in terms of workload. And then to start the season, Jabron Payne and Jadarian Price are going to split whatever is remaining and essentially fight for, who's going to get majority of those carries out of those two guys. And I don't think that means, if the split goes to, I don't think it's going to be like 50-50 between whoever Estime is. Estime is 1 and whoever is 2. I don't think they're going to ever get a full, load that Estime would get. And I think that whoever is deemed the number 3 back is still going to get opportunities, right? Like it's still going to be a lot like last year of Diggs, Tyree, and Estime all got carries. I think that's going to be the same between Estime, Payne, and Price. I just think Estime is going to get the most no matter what. And then the other two are going to have to kind of fight for and prove that they're going to get, whatever chunk they're going to get essentially.
Yeah, exactly. It's, and we're going to see a lot of these guys. So I don't think it's going to be just 1, 2. I think we're going to see a lot of them. And I'm kind of looking forward to that. Jabron Payne showed that he's fully capable when he had his opportunity. The question is going to be when you've got a full complement in there and you've got an incoming freshman in Jeremiah Love as well. Where is it all going to go? But I fully expect Jadarian Price is going to be, the guy who kind of gets that first look, maybe along with Payne because of the spring that he had. But I expect Price to be right in there and be a big part of this explosive part of this offense this year. He's a guy who can make it go. Tim wants to know, what do you expect the efficiency of the offense to look like compared to last year? Over under 40 touchdowns.
So
we're talking touchdown passes. Is that what we're talking about here?
I think he's just talking about touchdowns in well, that's got to be that's only 3 touchdowns per game, and I think they're going to score more than 3 touchdowns per game.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take this in the regular season, right? Just the 12-game regular season. If we're looking at the efficiency of the offense to look like compared to last year, I think. Did you figure out how many total touchdowns they had last year?
I'm looking right now. I'm looking. I'll let
you know he's saying points per game. He's saying points per game.
Points per game. Okay, so not touchdowns, but points. Again, this is something that I just kind of spent some time looking at today. The scoring, the most points a Notre Dame football team has scored in a season. In 1968, it was like 37.6 points. 2 years ago, I believe their average was 36, like 36 and a half, something like that. Sam Hartman's Wake Forest team scored around 36 points per game. I expect it to be somewhere like, here's what's interesting. The top 6 teams in the nation last year in scoring offense, and included among that group were all 4 of the college football playoff teams were in the top 10. It might have even been in the top 6. I can look that up here in just a second. But they all, they were scoring in that 39 to 40 point range. The top 6 teams in the nation, which included Michigan, were scoring 40 points or better last year. The more you can score, the better. But like TCU was number 9, and they were like 38, 39 points a game. I expect Notre Dame to be sitting somewhere around 37 points per game. I think that would be very reasonable to expect this season, around 37 points a game.
Yeah, you kind of took my thunder. I don't think that they're necessarily going to hit 40 a game because that's kind of crazy. That's like Ohio State.
It's numbers. Elite. If they're averaging 40, considering the defenses that they're going to play, if they do end up averaging 40, then that means they've won at least 2 of those big 3 games, I think.
Yeah, and I just like 40 again. That's like Ohio State when they put up 60 points against Rutgers and don't care about running up the score and just just let it rip against some of these bad teams that they play. So to me, I think with some of these new clock rules, that number is going to naturally lose a little bit. I don't think they get to 40. I think they're above 30. I think they're between like the 33 and 38 range. If I sat like a min and a max, that's kind of where I'm at, 33 to 38 points.
I still don't think this new clock rule is going to, shorten things as much as a lot of people are expecting. I've seen, between 10 and 15 plays per game, basically. I think the biggest effect is going to be, because so many teams are still running some sort of tempo offense that I feel like the biggest effect is going to, be like late in the half when, like you get a first down and now the clock doesn't stop or like you're in the 2-minute drill and the clock doesn't stop, those kind of things. The clock runs a little bit more. I don't think it's going to have a huge effect overall. I think you're going to see, you're going to lose some plays per game, but I don't think it's going to be a huge number that ends up being lopped off. That's just what I personally think, but we're going to have to, again, we're going to have to wait and see as this thing goes along exactly what that looks like, but I don't think it's going to have a huge effect myself.
I just have one question for Crying Belly. Do you enjoy being a Notre Dame fan? Like, do you get up in the morning and say, I'm thankful for being a Notre Dame fan, or do you just instantly find things to be upset about? Like, I just genuinely want to know, like, do you, like, we all, sit up here and can get angry and can talk about, this and that, but like, I just don't know. Like, does he enjoy being a Notre Dame fan or not? That's really what I want to know at the end of the day.
I think my bigger question is like, do you enjoy, a casual cocktail? Because maybe if you don't, the cocktail could be the way to go. Now, I'm obviously saying in the comfort of your living room or wherever it happened to be, not just going crazy. He says, I just want to win, man. I get it. But,
sadly,
the sky doesn't always
isn't going to help you either. Compared to Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman's going to help you win more, Crying Bailey.
That's right. Okay. So DJ asking, wondering what Jaden Mickey's role will be this year. And I think that's a good question because you've got obviously Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison as the corners. And like for right now, at least coming into the season, we don't expect Jaden Mickey to unseat either one of those guys, but he's behind Cam Hart in the field corner. And then you've got kind of a little bit of a log jam in terms of the nickel position where we would expect Thomas Harper to be and where we, like Clarence Lewis got a lot of work in the spring and that kind of thing. So I think at the very least, Jaden Mickey is a key reserve with a lot of upside. And what exactly that role looks like, that's maybe kind of a question that we can pose, to Marcus Freeman or try to get some visuals on as we see what kind of work that he's getting during fall camp, because, the reps tend to, and you can kind of speak to this, Jess, the reps tend to switch once you get to fall camp compared to spring camp.
Yeah, that's I'll address that one right now. In the spring camp, coaches are, it's okay. We're learning. We're teaching the younger guys stuff here.
Uh-huh.
They're getting their reps. By the time you get to fall, you mess up. It's no longer, it's okay. It's full on yelling, screaming. And the 1 and 2s are going to get majority of the reps come spring. And, whatever's left over, the 3s will get. I mean, outside of that, there's not reps. Put it like this. In spring ball, there's reps to go around for everyone. In fall practice, reps go 1 and 2 and maybe a little bit of your 3.
Yes.
And the tempo and the expectations are turned up drastically, right? There's just no longer room for mistakes because essentially you're preparing for the season, and if you can only go as far as what you as a team are willing to accomplish, right? And so the more you're able to learn and catch on, the faster and more developed that team can get for game one. And that's Marcus Freeman's job, is to get them prepared as a team for game one. And in the spring, it's really just a time to feel out where exactly everyone's kind of at and get an idea of depth chart by the time the fall camp rolls around. And so when fall camp comes around, you kind of have a nice pecking order of who's going to be where, and it's time to go at that point. There's really no more time of, everyone, the participation trophies are over. It's not everyone's
Right.
getting reps. It's the guys who are going to be playing on Saturday and contributing to the success of the team, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Cryan's brother Tyler wants to know, do you think this is going to be the most overrated team this year that everyone is building hype around?
I was trying to find this question, and I understand there's a lot of hype, and my answer will be no, because I don't think that this team is overrated. I think this team has very good parts. I think that we are maybe overrating what the potential of one player can do and how far they can carry it. But again, I'm optimistic about that one player because of everything else that's surrounding him. It's not like Sam Hartman's walking into a room full of crap. He's walking into a very solid offensive line. He's walking into a running back room that has tons of depth. He's walking into a wide receiver room that has ton of athleticism, but it's relatively unproven, right? So his job is to help those wide receivers develop throughout the season. And then you look at the other side of the ball, they have a very, very elite secondary. I think that their linebackers played well last year, and I think they get underappreciated, and they're going to take another step forward this season. I think their defensive line as a unit is going to have tons of depth. So I just think that everything surrounding Sam Hartman is only going to allow him to escalate Notre Dame as a whole. But if he was walking into, just average or mediocre at everything I just kind of listed, then yeah, I would say that we're kind of overrating or overhyping him. But when you look at the surrounding cast around him, I think that he was the final piece of the puzzle that can really put them over the top this season.
Yeah, I think it's curious that we just had a question a few minutes ago about should Notre Dame fans be more optimistic, basically. And now Tyler is saying, is this the most overrated team this year that everyone's building hype around? So again, there are both spectrums. I think it's, there's definitely some pessimists and there are some maybe who are being overly optimistic, but I completely agree with what you're talking about. If anything, we are building, to Cryan's point, this is, like, again, he takes it to the extreme, but to his point, there is a lot of hype and a lot on Sam Hartman and what he can do for this offense. But as we've already talked about, he's going to have an offensive line and a running game like he never had at Wake Forest. And he is the piece that Notre Dame has not had for what, like almost a decade and a half now at this point in terms of the quarterback, a guy who can stretch it downfield. And when you combine those teams or combine those two concepts, really good offensive line with really good running game and running backs and a quarterback that can stretch it downfield, I think it's going to be, I think it's this stands a chance to be the most fun offense that we've seen at Notre Dame in maybe, like since Quinn and Samardzija and those guys were hooking up, basically.
I found a really good question that you didn't star, but I wanted to get into. There was actually two of them, and they were both from DT Rollhunter. He just kind of went on like a spree, and I noticed them, and I wanted to get to them. I'll ask you this one first. What would be more surprising, Notre Dame's rush defense being top 5 or Notre Dame's passing yards being top 5 per game?
Okay, so rush defense top 5.
Yes.
Or what?
Or offensive passing yards per game being top 5 in the nation.
Which would be more surprising?
Yes.
Well, That's a really good question because, again, I was just digging into a lot of different stats and stuff like that. And when you look at where Notre Dame's rush defense was last year, it was actually fairly, respectable.
It just
And
cracked it when they needed it to be at its
yeah,
strongest.
that's exactly it. Like number one in the nation last year was Georgia at around 77 yards per game allowed. Michigan was number 7. Notre Dame was really not far off the pace. They allowed 131 yards per game. Now, to get that much better, you're basically going to have to cut that in half.
You got to be under 100 to be considered.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think they can push that at least, like Ohio State was 25th, allowing 121 yards per game. Notre Dame was 37, allowing 131. So they weren't, they were like an above average team that was still far from being elite. I can't see with the personnel that they have making that kind of leap from one season to the next to become that kind of elite offense. Now, it would still be a pretty good jump for them, to jump into that top 5 in terms of passing offense. But adding Sam Hartman and having the receivers, Tobias Merriweather, Jaden Thomas, Chris Tyree, plus the freshmen, whichever one or two or, however many end up being out there, I would give the passing, I still don't think it's going to happen, but I would give the passing offense a lot better chance of cracking top 5 than the rushing defense. I still think the rushing defense can push up toward top 15, top 20, but I don't think top 5 is probably realistic for this year.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say that I would be more surprised if the run defense was top 5 just because of what goes into that and how hard that is to overall accomplish. And I think that I would be surprised if Notre Dame's passing offense was top 5 as well, because I think they're going to get a lot of help from the run game. So they're not necessarily going to need, that kind of passing output. So I would be generally surprised by both of them, but I would say being a top 5 rushing defense, I would be more surprised at just because of how more relatively difficult it would be. And basically for what you were kind of going into, I just think that granted that their linebackers are good, but I don't think Notre Dame ultimately plays a scheme that wants to be a top 5 rushing defense in college football. I think there's a lot of give and take in their defense, right? Like I think there's, it's a gap sound. I don't think they're trying to ultimately be shut down in one thing. I just think that they want to be top 20 in passing and rushing at the end of the day. And I'm not saying that given the opportunity that they wouldn't take being a top 5 rushing defense. I just think that they kind of know who they are. And again, I think they're more of a well-rounded, balanced overall defense in comparison.
Yeah. Tim asks, how much better should this, I think he's saying receiving core be, facing Benjamin Morrison and Cam, et cetera? And I think this is a really good point. And you tend to see this, like we've seen it, especially when it comes to offensive line, defensive line, like in training camps where there has been questions with one of the lines and the other line tends to be a whole lot better. Like those training and last year wasn't, we saw some of it in the spring, I believe it was, like where you see some of those training camp battles, like the one side tends to make the other better. And I completely agree with that. There is some inexperience, but between, again, adding Sam Hartman and the fact that these guys have to go up against the likes of Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart quite often, I do think that is really going to push them and help make them better.
Yeah, I think this is a relatively kind of easier question to answer because, I mean, this goes to, the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the et ceteras of the world. You want, in order to be great, that's determined at practice, right? Game time is when you show up and just play. There's not a lot you can do once the game has started, right? Like it would be like running, say you're running track and your mile time was consistently, 7 minutes, and then you expected just to run a 6-minute mile on meet day just because it's meet day. That's not how it's going to work. These guys are only going to get better, by being pushed in practice. And I think having people like Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart and Jaden Mickey and et cetera on the back end, I mean, they're going to push you. They're just as competitive as the wide receivers, right? Just as bad as the wide receiver wants to catch the ball, the cornerback wants to get the interception or, defend the play well, etc. And when you're going against someone who was an All-American as a freshman and is a preseason All-American again this year, that's just going to make everyone better. It's going to drive up competitiveness, and it's just overall, it's just going to make everyone better, both in both rooms, wide receivers and DBs.
I concur. I completely concur with that. Yep. Tyler Evans, thanks for the super chat. He says he meant to say nationally overrated, not Notre Dame. I believe Notre Dame is going to go 11-1. All right. Thank you much for the clarification there. Where was this other one? Okay, this one. Saw this. Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker, says he asked Brian this earlier. You can pick one of each position listed to play for this season's team. Brady Quinn or Jimmy Clausen, Michael Floyd or Jeff Samardzija, Lewis Nix or Stephon Tuitt. So you get one of each of those groups. Who are you going with?
You can pick one of each position.
So you're going between Brady Quinn and Jimmy Clausen. You get one of those two. You get Michael Floyd or Jeff Samardzija, one of those two. And then either Nix or Tuitt, one of those two.
I would go Brady Quinn over Jimmy Clausen. I would go. I mean, Michael Floyd and Jeff Samardzija are basically the same wide receiver, so that's a little tough.
If I'm taking Quinn, I'm probably going with Samardzija since they paired up so much.
Yeah,
I
just think that. I think Michael Floyd's frame is a little bit better. I think he's just a little bit more physical. And that's not to take away from Samardzija, but I would just trust Floyd to go up and get more of those 50-50 balls. Samardzija was just a really good deep down field threat. He wasn't a type of wide receiver who's necessarily going to go up. He's not like a Des Bryant type wide receiver, right? Like he's not going to go
but
up.
I also like what he can do after the ball.
That's true.
I'm not saying I don't like what Floyd did, but I like what Samardzija did after the ball a little bit better.
That's true. So you're going Samardzija. I think I would go Floyd. And then in terms of the defense, I would go Lewis Nix because I think that they need an internal run stuffer. And I think that would help overall with those kind of, those run plays in key situations. Like he's automatically going to draw a double team. He's automatically probably going to stuff one of the A gaps. Like I would definitely just – his presence alone is an automatic double team. So I would have to go with Lewis Nix.
Yep, absolutely. I'm going now. Again, they've got a really good quarterback, so it's not like quarterback is a position of need for this team. But for this exercise, I would go with Quinn over Clausen. I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks. I mean, they're both two of the best quarterbacks in program history. But I would go with Quinn. He definitely won more games. Again, I would go with Samardzija for the reasons we listed and the fact that if I'm going with Quinn, it makes sense to go with Samardzija since that's where all of Samardzija's yards came from, and completely agree with what you said. Spot on with Lewis Nix. They need that more physical like 2012 Lewis Nix on this year's
team. You weren't running on them.
Yeah, exactly.
So I had another one I wanted to get to with DT Roll Hunter, and these are just fun. I think these are like it's very similar to the first question that he posed about the what would be more surprising. So this one is, what would be more surprising? Notre Dame having 1,000-yard receiver and running back, or 3 defensive backs with 3+ interceptions?
Oh my goodness! So 1K, 1 receiver plus running back, or 3 DBs
with 3 interceptions.
I'm going to go the 1,000-yard receiver and running back.
Really? You think that'd be more surprising? I'm the opposite.
More surprising. I'm sorry. I thought you said which is more likely to happen. Yeah, I think the 1,000-yard duo is more likely to happen. So
I think that's almost a guarantee. I think that
I'm not able to read the question on the screen, so it's like I'm processing. So yeah, the 3 defensive, because I mean, look, just look at last year. I think they're going to get more turnovers earlier on this year. And it was basically Benjamin Morrison getting everything. I think Morrison and Hart each have a chance to get it. And I guess maybe a safety ends up having a chance to get it as well. But I still think that would be a little bit more surprising based on recent history.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with I think that they will crack 1,000-yard receiver. I think it's gonna be Tobias Merriweather. I think they're gonna crack 1,000-yard rusher, and that's gonna be Audric Estime. And then I think that if the question was 3 DBs with 2 interceptions, I would take the DBs. But that's just 3 is a good year for a DB, right? That means you're getting an interception in 1 in 4 games. You're getting every 4 games, you're getting 1 interception. That's pretty solid. So I'm more likely to say that the 1,000 yards happen. And then again, Crying Belly coming out here and saying the DBs would be some more surprising, but let's be real, neither are going to happen. This isn't the pessimism that I need, like.
And by the way, Johnny's saying, fellas, his name is D. Troll Hunter. I always have problems with it. It looks like, like maybe there needs to be some spaces in there, or he needs to put the dashes in there.
Everyone knows who we're talking about.
It's just easier to say DT, It's like, that's just the way it is. A lot of great questions tonight, both, optimistic, pessimistic, whatever they happen to be. A lot of good ones. Much appreciated. Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for rapid fire.
All right. I've got 1 or 2 that I might work in it. Now, I'm told, well, I'll just hold off on that. Let's get the first question first. We all expect a big breakout season for Tobias Merriweather this year. Speaking of optimism, which of these former Irish wide receiver breakouts do you think Merriweather's season will most resemble this year? Equinemius St. Brown, when he went from 1 catch, 8 yards as a freshman to 58 catches for 961 and 9 touchdowns the next year. Will Fuller, who went from 6 catches and 160 yards as a freshman to 76 catches for 1,094 yards and 15 touchdowns in year 2. Golden Tate, going from 6 catches for 131 as a freshman to 58 for 1,080 and 10 touchdowns as a sophomore. Or Jeff Samardzija, who's a little bit different, but in his first 2 seasons, he only combined for 24 receptions, 327 yards in his freshman and sophomore seasons combined, but then he blew up the next year as a junior when Charlie Weiss arrived and went 77 catches, 1,249 yards, and 15 touchdowns. So whose breakout do you most expect Tobias's breakout to look like this year?
Yeah, so to me, these are kind of lumped in 2 together. Like Will Fuller and Jeff Samardzija, very similar numbers: 66 receptions, 77 yards, just about 1,100 and 1,200 yards, and each had 15 touchdowns. Like those are kind of replicas. And then you look at Equinemius St. Brown, 58 for just about 1,000 and 9 touchdowns, and then Golden Tate again, 58, just about 1,000 and 10 touchdowns. So those groupings are very similar in my opinion. I think that is going to be very similar to the Golden Tate and Equinemius St. Brown, just because of the reception numbers, right? Like I don't think that Tobias is going to have the 76, 77 receptions. I think it's going to be closer to the 58 number, just because Sam Hartman has more love to go around on the offense. I think he's going to be incorporating a lot of different pieces. But I really like kind of where those numbers sit. I think that it's going to be very similar to what Golden Tate did. I think he's going to be around 50 to 60 catches, 750 to 1,000 yards, and somewhere in between like 6 to 10 touchdowns. So I think that's right where Tobias Merriweather falls in terms of where his breakout season is going to be.
I completely agree with that. Like when you look at Golden Tate, who had 58 for 1,080, that's like 18 and a half yards per catch. And St. Brown with 58 catches for 961, that was about 16 and a half yards per catch. And that's what I expect from Tobias Merriweather. I don't expect him to be like 58 catches, especially coming from what he came from, would still be a pretty healthy season. And really, when you consider what Notre Dame receivers have done on the last few years with Michael Mayer being on the field, it would still be a pretty healthy season. But I don't expect him to be the big volume guy. I expect, his, just like you said, I expect his receptions to be a little bit more moderate, But, again, Sam Hartman stretched the field. Tobias Merriweather, big, lanky body with some speed and agility. I expect him to be able to go get some balls downfield, and I expect him to be a bit more of a big play type guy. So I agree with what you're saying. Somewhere in that mix, St. Brown, Golden Tate is what I think it will be as well. What are you chuckling at?
I just saw a Tobias is going for 100, 2,025. I mean, if he does that, that's I know there's some joking in there, but on it like that, you might as well just hand over the award to him at that point if he's going to have that kind of season.
Yeah, and I just saw James saying, honestly, he's a blend of Shark and Fuller, has size and speed. Shark Fuller hybrid. That's pretty good. Pretty good comparison. I like that. Again, like I like, I like what Samardzija was able to do, just with especially for as long and lanky as he was. He had pretty good body control, and he had, really good agility, the ability to, make some cuts, like with quick twitch that a lot of guys that size don't have. And I think that Tobias definitely has some of that as well. So I can kind of see that hybrid that you're talking about.
Yeah, Mr. 2.0 brought up a good point, and why I think that, he's not going to be that reception guy. Like, I think someone like Colsey is going to have a really good season this year.
Mm-hmm.
Just another big frame that Sam Hartman can take advantage of and manipulate, manipulate defenses with, essentially. So the love is definitely going to go around. But I think Tobias, again, I think he ends up north of 50 receptions, north of 750 yards, and north of 7 touchdowns. I think that's a good baseline for him.
I mean, between Tyree and Thomas, those, and you mentioned Colsey as well, but like Tyree and Thomas in that mix as well, like more volume receptions, I think. So, between like the different kind of bodies they have and playing inside and outside and all that kind of stuff. Excuse me. Jesse, do you have some whiteboard for us today?
I do. All of this Tobias Merriweather conversation has got me thinking about what can Tobias Merriweather do in terms of route running to be successful this season. So, I'm just here for the fans, and they have been disappointed in me recently. So it's time to fulfill the need, the desire. It is whiteboard time. So I'm going to try to keep it nice and simple today. Hard for me to do, not really concise with words, but we'll try to do it to the best of our ability.
All right.
So first of all, I think what has to be understood is that Tobias Merriweather is going to be your Z wide receiver, right? So what does that mean in terms of his placement on the field? Well, usually the Z wide receiver is lined up near the tight end or the tight end side of the ball, right? And so that, not that that limits you, but we know Notre Dame likes to run an offense with tight ends. And I don't think that's going to change with Jared Parker, being a guy who's coached tight ends before, knowing what Marcus Freeman wants to accomplish in the run game. Having a tight end on the field is only going to help, those things. So that's the first thing to understand, is that Merriweather has got to be near or on the same side as the tight end majority of the time. That's what it means to be a Z wide receiver. So then you start looking at, okay, what can he do out of, this is just a 11 personnel, 1 tight end, 1 running back, and 3 wide receivers. So we have 2 wide balls in the middle of the field, 2 wide receivers to the right, running back to the right, and then we have a fullback and the Z wide receiver to the left side. Again, Merriweather's got to be with the tight end being the Z wide receiver. So I think there's 2 basic things that come up in route running. Are we going to be running a man route, or are we going to be, running a zone route? And that's what the advantage of having someone like Sam Hartman is going to be, is he's going to very early identify pre-snap. Are they in zone? Are they in man? And getting Tobias Merriweather and everyone else into the right route concepts, depending on man or zone. Yes. So out of Tobias Merriweather, what would I want to see if we are looking at some zone? Let me get some things adjusted real quick. What I want to see out of Tobias Merriweather is if they determine zone early on and they kind of get into a more of a zone route, I think ultimately what would benefit someone like Tobias Merriweather, knowing he has speed and size, is literally getting into a fade route down the sideline. And essentially what Sam Hartman has to do is place that ball, just over top of the corner and just underneath the safety. And I think with Tobias's speed and size, that shouldn't be hard. He should be able to get past the corner and then use his size to ultimately kind of seal off the safety and have Sam Hartman drop that ball, basically right in the breadbasket there. So that's a lot of what I'm expecting, out of the zone stuff is fades, a lot of fades down the sideline. Another route that you could get into, depending on, route concept, is, again, some more of these maybe deeper kind of post routes, right? You're trying to work over the top of the corner. And again, the safety is going to be bailing out. So again, you kind of have to drop the ball in between both of them there, knowing that Tobias, again, is going to be able to use his speed to get past the first level and then use his body and size to seal off the second level. So that's what I'd like to see out of Tobias and a lot of the zone routes. And then getting into some of these, when we notice man-to-man concepts, you're going to notice that, let me go back to 2D. What you're going to notice out of that is, these DBs are going to be pressed up a little bit more. Maybe this linebacker gets pressed up a little bit more. And because of that, this safety might help out just a little bit more down. Be more of a center fielder, I guess you should say, in terms of man concepts. But what I like if you want to go against Tobias Merriweather in a man concept, I think that bodes well for him too, because that's when you're in man concepts, that's where the art of route running comes into play. You have to be able to run routes way more concisely in man coverage. So in this case, again, a typical man beater is running some sort of quick slant, in or out, depending on what you want, what you're trying to accomplish. And that can be ran at 5 yards. That can be ran at 7 yards. And really that can be ran at 10 yards too. There's just because it's a slant doesn't mean it has to be run immediately, right? And so I think that is a quick hitter where you're looking at third and short, maybe second and short, and you notice that they're pressed up on you. Why not use Merriweather's size and just allow him to get in front of these, smaller DBs and just put the ball right on his chest? I think that's a lot of what you're going to see out of man, and you're going to see this tight end kind of flood the concept, right? He's going to get everyone kind of moving out of Merriweather's, I guess, general area and allow him to really work one-on-one. So to me, that's what I want to see out of Tobias. And I think that either way, he's got the makeup to beat both man and zone at a high rate.
I agree. And I think a lot of people agree with you as well. Good stuff with the whiteboard. It's been absent for a little bit. Good to have it back. Appreciate it.
I do what I can around here.
I'm going to go ahead and throw this crying belly question in here. He says, if you're Steve Angeli, passed up by Minchie on the depth chart, what's stopping you from entering the portal mid-season and leaving the QB room in a bad position depth-wise? I mean, there's nothing stopping him. The only question is, does he feel at least some kind of commitment to the team that he wouldn't make a move like that mid-season? Obviously, you had that a few years back at Clemson when Kelly Bryant got passed up by Trevor Lawrence. It happens. And, we've said it before, as Notre Dame continues to raise the bar with its recruiting the quarterback position, you're going to have guys who are probably going to have to make some decisions to leave at some point. You obviously hope that they don't happen mid-season, but they still could happen mid-season. So there's nothing to stop him other than whether or not he at least feels committed to the team. And if he's not playing, it's not like he's going to go play for somebody else mid-season right away. He might transfer someplace, but, he's not going to be able to play until the following season anyway.
My overall answer to that question is Angeli will complete his degree and then make whatever decision is best for him at that time. I think his number one priority, where he's been at on the depth chart now and how far he's gotten into his degree, I think that is going to be, the number one thing that he's going to focus on. Listen, I got to a point when I was playing and I knew I wanted to go on to graduate school, and football really wasn't, it was getting to the end of the road, right? I was playing in the NAIA, and it was just time to kind of focus on, what's going to take you further in your career. And so I think Angeli will be focused on something like his degree. And then if he is fortunate enough to finish that and have a little bit of eligibility left over, I think he might go on and have some fun at a smaller school and maybe get that opportunity to be, a starter before it's all said and done.
Yeah. And no, he has not completed his degree. He is only a sophomore right now. So, that is still a ways away, even if he's at an accelerated pace. And, again, no, he could, it's not like he could go join somebody right away. The portal is not open mid-season. So he could leave the team and lead the school. But again, kind of like I was just saying, it's not going to do him any good because you can't start actually transferring someplace until December rolls around. That's when the window opens to actually go someplace, just like with Drew Pine last year. So it's not like you could actually, pack up and go join a team like another team like a free agent in the middle of the season. So it would do him no good at that point. Jesse, Vince, and I spent some time this week talking about the movie Rudy, and I had some people ask what you think of the movie Rudy. So take it away.
I guess my opinion is highly sought after. Whoa, hang on. I'm going through some technical difficulties.
Yeah, now you're orange. Now you're blue.
At the moment. Give me one second here.
Kind of pink.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm not high on Rudy, to be honest with you. I think it's an inaccurate, overblown depiction of
coming in strong.
Yeah, I think it's a great feel-good story, and I think it's like it gives every kind of it basically is like no matter your size or ability, there's still a chance for you. And I don't think that that's very realistic, because even to get an opportunity as like a walk-on, or some schools hold the walk-on tryouts, it's just very unrealistic. Like he needed to be more of a, like, he just didn't have the intangibles to even be a guy who should be considered as a walk-on, right? Like, he was this small, unathletic kind of white guy who couldn't do a whole lot. And so to me, again, it's overblown. I've only seen it a couple of times because, again, it's not like it's some great movie. So yeah, would I recommend it to someone? Sure, I'd recommend it to someone who hasn't seen it before. But again, I think it gives false hope to people who really don't have too much of a chance.
Good underdog story, like I said, and like I've said before, I think they lay it on a little bit thick with the kid's got heart, and if you had the heart of Rudy, and they lay it on very thick. 9 references in the last 45 minutes to Rudy's heart. It's a little bit much, and to your point about what you were just talking about, we didn't mention this the other, like exactly what you're talking about. The guy who was the Notre Dame legacy, the other walk-on, in the movie, he never got to play. So like, even though he, had this Notre Dame connection and, he was there, had scholarship offers, could have played someplace else and all this stuff, he didn't. But, Rudy gets built up because of the fact that he got his handful of plays in one game at the end of the Georgia Tech game. But, look, again, good underdog story. It's Notre Dame. It holds up over time and all that stuff. But I definitely, there's some stuff that's a little bit too much for me.
It's exaggerated.
Yes, exactly. It's a Hollywood movie. It's exaggerated. That's right. Let me ask you this. If someone was going to make one new 30 for 30, you could only make one new 30 for 30 or docuseries that's Notre Dame related. Would you rather see one that is the real story of Rudy or something else? So like we're talking about how things were fabricated. Like, they didn't talk about the fact that he was actually in the Navy, and like the Jersey scene didn't happen, and Dan Devine wasn't this antagonist. He was actually pro Rudy. Would you like to see something that sort of sets the record straight about Rudy, or would you rather see a Notre Dame, documentary type 30 for 30 about something else?
Yeah. Let's see. If Rudy wasn't Rudy and they introduced the concept of Rudy, I think I'd be more on board for it as a 30 for 30 now. But knowing, what Rudy is and everything around it, I'm done with it. I don't need another 30 for 30 on Rudy. I would want to see it, something else. So my counter question for you would be, if Notre Dame did do a 30 for 30 on any sport, any topic at Notre Dame, what would you want your 30 for 30 documentary to be about?
I've been thinking about this, and I would actually I think that it would be one, the whole Jerry Faust scenario would be one that I think would be interesting. But that's going to skew to the negative. Like a high school coach from Cincinnati, much like Rudy, loved Notre Dame, wanted to come to Notre Dame, got his chance to coach Notre Dame. It didn't work out. But on the heels of that came one of the most successful spans in Notre Dame history as well. Tim Brown becomes a Heisman Trophy winner. Lou Holtz leads Notre Dame to a national championship, and within striking distance of a couple other national championships there in the early 90s. So I would like to see one sort of like the fall and rise of Notre Dame in the 80s, starting with the Jerry Faust era and into the Lou Holtz era, and how it was, built back up, and all of those iconic players who came out of that Lou Holtz era, and even, from the Faust era as well, because there were some good players from the Faust era. They just didn't have a lot of success at Notre Dame. So that's what I would like to see, something on that 1980s Faust to Holtz era at Notre Dame.
Yeah, so I would have two. Option one would be quite literally the Lou Holtz era at Notre Dame, going basically what you were talking about, when he entered the program and the rise of, Notre Dame football as we saw it in the 80s and 90s because of Lou Holtz. And then my next option would be just a good old 30 for 30 on Rocket Ismail and his time at Notre Dame. I think those would be the two that I'd want to go with, because I think that Rocket is one of the most exciting players of all time at Notre Dame. I didn't necessarily get to see it live, and so I would like to see, actual historic footage and just, interviews, him talking about his time at Notre Dame. I think that would be something that would be really interesting. And then obviously, the clipping call, that would be a big, proponent in the docuseries. So yeah,
Michigan kicking to him twice. Yeah, I dig that. And I mean, the 30 for 30s specifically have done a lot of different episodes on individual athletes. I think Rocket would be a great one to do. The fact that he got robbed of a Heisman Trophy, by a quarterback from, a WAC school that threw like 1 million interceptions that year. I think that would be interesting to talk about as well. I think a Rocket would be very interesting. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Somebody needs to get on that. I don't know why they haven't already. D Troll Hunter is trolling us right now.
Yeah, he said that he is going to hold this. He said, "I forgive you guys for this, but I want to know I hold it against you in the future." Talking about our Rudy take. And then someone said that basically we have impaired minds because we're Cowboy fans. And he said, well, I'm a Cowboys fan as well. So
I liked Rudy when it first came out. But again, I think the max on that movie is like 4 to 5 viewings.
That's what I mean. It's just,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not a huge rewatch of a movie. You watch a great movie 50 times and act like you've never seen it before. But I can only watch a movie so many times, and Rudy is not up there for a movie that I'm going to watch multiple times.
Yep, I concur. So, James, another question from the mailbag tonight. What do you foresee with CJ Carr in the 24 campaign? Does he plan to enroll early? Will he maintain his red shirt while playing the minimum of 4 games?
I think he enrolls early, but I don't think he gets any playing time in that first year.
Yeah, We've talked about this, really over the last few weeks about what's going to happen in 24 at the quarterback position. I still think they're going to go out and go to the transfer portal. Now, some of that's going to be determined by who's available in the portal, like what kind of quarterback you can get. Some of it's going to be determined on what they see from Angeli and Minchie this season. Okay,
counter to that, do you think if the wide receivers have a really productive year that makes them more confident in younger quarterbacks because they can kind of carry along a younger quarterback potentially. And if the wide receivers have more of a down year, do you think you need someone, not a down year, but not as, great? Do you think you need an experienced quarterback to kind of compensate for something like that?
I just think either way, they're going to go out, and the schedule is pretty conducive next year. Now they're going to start off on the road, so that's going to be, just like last year at Ohio State, they're going to Texas A&M to start the season next year. So do you want a guy who's potentially making, like whether it's any of these guys, assuming they don't get any real extensive playing time this year, do you want one of those guys going down to Texas A&M making their first start, in a game that's essentially right off the bat, I think, going to have college football playoff implications, because it's also going to be easier to get to the playoff next year, but you can't afford to go on the road and lay an egg right away against Texas A&M. So that's why I think, you probably want someone with some experience coming in. Would have been a lot better off having someone with experience last year, just like 2 years ago when you got Jack Cohn. So,
yeah.
I think he, like you said, I think he enrolls early. I think he maintains his red shirt by playing in a maximum. It would actually be a maximum of 4 games, not a minimum. But I think that's kind of the way that it ends up. DJ says he thinks Minchie starts in 24, and they may go to the portal for a QB room. Again, like I know a lot of people talk about
they're going to the portal. They need some sort of overall experience. Both those guys are going to have zero experience.
And I just don't think,
there's got to be a safety blanket.
Like if you go to the portal, you're not going to, I just don't think you're bringing in someone who's got a 50-50 chance of winning a starting job, because that guy, if he's got a year of remaining eligibility, he doesn't want to come to Notre Dame and potentially sit on the bench. He wants to come in and be able to start. That's why he'd come to a place like Notre Dame. So I don't think you're going to add a guy just for some depth next year if you're bringing a quarterback in out of the portal. That's like dream scenario, I think.
I wish dream scenario is Tyler Buckner never left, saw some playing time this year, really developed under Sam Hartman, and really took the reins the year after that. But yeah, I get it. He's a top talent and he wants to play now, and you can't squander the window. So,
yep. Fill in the blank. The MLB All-Star Game uniforms were blank.
So I got to put this into 2 categories, and I'll fill in the blank for both. The MLB All-Star uniforms were pretty. The MLB NL jerseys were hideous. I hate when teams go just because, like the AL did those nice teal with some white pants. There was nice color. It felt like summertime. I was all cool with those. But I don't understand why they always get it half right and half wrong. Just because, you're not wearing the whites, as the home team. I don't understand why the NL has to go with that such dark, harsh, like black and navy type scheme. Like, that's just so ugly. Like, you can still do vibrant stuff just because
the dark on dark, especially.
That's what I mean. Like, why are you going dark on dark? You don't have to do that.
That was like a travel ball uniform.
That's what I mean. They always do that, though. They always make one of them look really nice, and they always go dark on dark for the other ones. And it's like, you don't have to do that. You're like, who? In what world is navy blue and black going well together in a summertime all-star game? I just don't get it.
I've got a solution, and I know they think they're going to sell merchandise, and like you're still in your 20s, so you're the guy that they're supposed to be trying to market this whole thing.
I love the hats. The hats were great.
Hats were good. I like the hats. I don't understand why they, again, I understand why, because they think they're going to sell more merchandise. I don't know how many jerseys and stuff like that they were going to sell with those ugly uniforms last night, but that's the reason you do it. But like, everyone, it's cool if everyone wears the same hat, but let them wear their real uniform from their team like they used to. I think it looks cool when they're, like you still, everyone wears white or everyone wears gray or whatever, but it's from your actual team. That's what's cool about the All-Star game, is you actually can identify, what team everybody's from. And it makes it a little bit harder. Like when you're watching the game and you're trying to, what exactly team is he from? Because again, everyone's got the same hat, the same
when
helmet.
they're batting, the only way I would know what team they're from is they had the logo on their hip on their pants. I don't know if you saw that. That's the only reason. I mean, getting into the batting too, I thought the helmets were ugly too. They were just these awkward A and L or A and N's on the helmets. Like
I literally kept thinking like the National League guys were from Northwestern or something. That big N and the black that they had.
It's just so bad, and they have people who are dedicated solely to do this, and it's like, that's really what you came up with? That's what you thought would be the most appealing? I don't know. I could do a better job than that.
I concur. So James with a follow-up about the quarterbacks. Are we going to the portal every year now? Honest question.
I think they're going to go to the portal. And we talked about this, I think, like a couple of weeks ago, or like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, in terms of what quarterback development would look like in terms, in the next 4 years or so. I think what's happening right now is you're kind of stripping away or relaying the foundation. And I don't think you want to go to the portal every year, but I think you kind of have to out of a need right now because of what you inherited from the past regime and the lack of development of quarterback. And so until you can internally develop your own quarterbacks and get a conveyor belt going of, producing quarterback year after year, you're going to have to go to the portal because you have no time to waste at Notre Dame. You can't just put in a freshman quarterback and hope things go well, because then everyone's going to be crying that they're going 6-6. But that's what's going to happen if you roll out a CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie. You got to have someone in there that is a proven winner. And until you can, start that conveyor belt of the quarterback development, which I think Marcus Freeman is going to do, he just can't do it at the snap of a finger, right? Like, it takes time. And so I think until he gets that rhythm in motion, he's got to go to the portal.
I agree. And, I said last year, I didn't think it was the worst idea last year not to go to the portal. But then the worst case scenario happens. Tyler Buckner gets injured, because at least Buckner had some game experience from the year before when Jack Cohn was here, even if it was as a package guy. They wouldn't need to go, as you said before, they wouldn't need to go potentially to the portal again next year if Tyler Buckner had stuck around. The quarterback room would look a lot different. It's crazy because, like, when I think we were walking out of spring practice and one of the guys on the beat said, well, we'll never see those three quarterbacks together again. And I didn't necessarily think that it was going to be Tyler Buckner who was going to bolt the way he did. And there goes Tyler Buckner. Now the whole quarterback room looks a lot different. You're exactly right. Like, you've got to get that kind of succession plan in place. And I didn't think that it was the worst decision not to go with a transfer last year, but because of the way things ended up last year and the opportunity to go out and get literally the most experienced quarterback in college football history, because he's going to be playing in his 6th year now, to go and be able to get that with everything that he's done. I think that was an opportunity that was too good to pass up for Notre Dame. And now you're hoping that he can mentor these guys, and maybe by the end of the season, they have a better feel for Kenny Minchie and whether or not he's going to be ready next year. You want to have competition, but I just think that there's a very strong case that they will be able, or that they will go back to the portal again.
To me, it's a really, because it really honestly feels like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? Like, if say you don't go to the portal and you trust your young quarterbacks, and then for whatever reason your young quarterback gets hurt, aka Tyler Buckner last year. Well, why didn't you have someone ready? Why didn't you have someone who could step in and take the charge? And then it's, oh, you went out into the portal and got yourself a security blanket. Why are you trusting him and not, focusing on developing your own homegrown quarterbacks? I just think it's, again, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I honestly have no problems with what they're doing. And yeah, I'll go back to basically what I was just saying. I really think that they're going to the portal as a necessity, but they will, over the years, start to develop their own kind of system of quarterback development. But until that happens, you're going to have to go to the portal.
Yeah. Back to the All-Star game. Nate Eovaldi wore an earpiece and talked to Joe Davis and John Smoltz in the broadcast booth while he was pitching last night. What'd you think of that move?
I'm not here for it. And to me, there were multiple conversations with the pitchers, and it just felt like the pitchers, like on the back of their mind, just wanted to be like, "Leave me alone. Just let me pitch. I'm in an All-Star game, right? Like,
But
why
he
do we
agreed
need
to
to
wear
do
it. He agreed to wear the piece, and he agreed to talk to
Yeah,
him.
but no one's gonna say no, right? Like it's the All-Star game, and if someone comes up to you and they say, "Hey, like we really want you to put the earpiece in, and we're just gonna chit chat with you for a little bit," like no one's gonna say no. But to me, at the end of the day, it's just like it felt like the overall vibe was just like, "Leave me alone. Why are we doing this? Like I'm only here because you guys want me to be here." I don't know. It just felt like a little bit too much for me, right? Like just it's one thing to talk to the position players, but I don't need to, be talking to the pitcher as he's going into the windup and all the. It's too much for the pitchers. I don't mind it for the outfielders who are predominantly just standing out there hoping something comes to them. But when we're talking about a pitcher, the guy who's got to literally pitch at every pitch, it's just too much for me. Too much.
Yeah, I was really surprised, because like you said, it's one thing for a position player to do. I was shocked that a pitcher would agree to do it, but Evaldi was out there. It's like I think they asked him one question and he gives up a single and he's like, oof. And then he gives up another single. And it's like, it didn't seem very happy.
That's what I mean. He's trying to focus. This is the All-Star game. This is like
right.
the pinnacle of his career. The last thing he needs to be focused on
the All-Star game.
is answering John Smoltz's question about, whatever he's got to ask. I thought it was really cool when they did that segment where Ortiz, A-Rod, and Jeter were all sitting behind the on-deck circle. I thought that was really cool. Yeah, I thought that was enjoyable.
That was one of the more enjoyable. Like after the first inning, when the two outfielders, Garcia and the left fielder, the Tampa Bay Rays, Randy Arozarena, when they made the two defensive plays in the first inning, like that was the most excitement there for a long time. And then they went to that little trio, and that was pretty fun after Ortiz got over the weathercast that he started things off with. So, but I was definitely surprised that Evaldi agreed to do something like that as a pitcher. But he walked him through that strikeout that he had later in the inning, and that was kind of cool. Talking about he was talking about what pitch he was going to throw and all that kind of stuff. But again, shocked that that a pitcher would do it. Fill in the blank. ESPN's broadcast of the Home Run Derby was blank.
ESPN's broadcast of the Home Run Derby was lackluster. They dropped the ball. I got sick of hearing launch angle and exit velo and da. Just give me the Chris Berman back, gone. You know what I mean? Like it's the Home Run Derby. I don't care how they hit it. It's the whole point of the freaking derby, right? They're just there to hit bombs. Everyone's gonna do it a different way. Maybe you're freaking dipping your shoulder back and trying to launch everything. Maybe you're trying to stay on top of it a little bit more, but it was just too much, like it's just over analytical. Just let these guys hit home runs and have fun with it because that's what it's supposed to be. And I just felt like they took some of the fun out of it and tried to just be so analytical about, the swing path and exit velo and launch angle. And it's just too much,
And you didn't really get to see any of the home runs. Like they did a straight split screen of the hitter and the outfield, and you didn't get to it's like with this format that they've gone to over the last few years, you don't actually get to see how far any of these balls are going. I would much rather see just like a small insert of the batter and then actually, like a bigger, wide screen of the outfield to actually see where the ball is going. Because
they hit it and then you just see like a stat pass of where it was going.
You couldn't even see if it was what it was doing or that it had gone out, And so that was I thought the best part of the night. The two things were Julio Rodriguez with his 41 home runs, the hometown guy setting a record, and then Adley Rutschman after he hit 20
that was tremendous.
Hit 20 from the left side. He gets his little break, and then in 30 seconds, he hits 7 more home runs from the right side. He's the first guy ever in the history of the Home Run Derby to switch hit during the Home Run Derby. So that was a pretty cool moment. And unfortunately, he ended up getting beat by Luis Robert, in that first round. But
do you want to hear something funny?
Sure.
I filled out a home run bracket, and it was like a national competition. And I can't remember, like if you got it right, it put you into a pool that could potentially win, whatever. I got the entire thing right. I just didn't hit submit.
Oh,
I got
man.
every matchup right down to the winner, everything.
Really?
I got all of them correct. And luckily, I still bet on Vladdy Jr. to win the whole thing. So I made a couple bucks off of that on FanDuel. But yeah, I filled out, and I was just looking at it and I was like, this kind of feels right. And then I took a screenshot of it and then I realized I never hit submit. So
Oh, man.
that was
That's
super
brutal.
fun.
That's brutal. All right. Well, a lot of good talk, a lot of good quarterback talk and everything else. We got Jesse's true opinion on Rudy tonight. So we got that. John Christophic, I missed this one earlier, says the program is the best sports movie. Have you seen the program before?
I don't know.
Big program fan? I don't
think I have.
I might have seen it once. It's been a long time since I've seen the program. I might have to see if I can find it and watch it again sometime. All right. Well, Henry is barking us out, so we'll wrap up on that.
It is time to wrap it up.
He did. All right, Jess, I will talk to you tomorrow. Got a lot coming up again on tomorrow's show. Thanks for all the great questions tonight. We had a lot of good ones tonight. We started slow, but finished strong. So that's what's important. So we will talk to you tomorrow. Hit the like button on your way out. And of course, subscribe, rate, and review. We'll talk to you mañana on IB Nation Sports Talk.